Nam Talu Cave. On October 13, 2007, 9 people entered Nam Talu Cave in Khao National Park, Thailand. The group included 6 tourists, 4 Swiss nationals, a 10-year-old German boy, and a British teenage girl, along with 2 experienced Thai guides. The cave was known for its scenic passages filled with shallow water. During the dry season, guided tours were common and considered safe, but this tour was happening in the middle of Thailand's rainy season. The group entered shortly after noon. At the cave entrance, the weather appeared stable. No rain had fallen in the immediate area that morning, and conditions seemed perfectly safe. The guides saw no reason for concern. What they didn't account for was rainfall that had occurred further upstream in the nearby mountains, where the cave's watershed begins. Nam Talu is part of a complex drainage system, highly sensitive to upstream flooding even when local skies are clear. The water was already moving toward them. As the group made their way deeper into the cave, they followed a stream passage that gradually grew deeper. The guides noticed the water level slowly rising, but they continued forward. The tourists were enjoying the experience, unaware of what was building behind them. Minutes later, a flash flood surged through the tunnel. The water rose with terrifying speed. Within moments, it filled the narrow sections of the cave, leaving no airspace in critical passages. Panic erupted. One of the guides shouted for everyone to climb toward higher ground. Some members of the group managed to scramble up a rocky slope to safer areas. Others were caught in the current. The force of the water was overwhelming. The narrow passageway offered no room to maneuver, no alternate routes, no escape. The tunnel flooded completely within minutes. 8 of the 9 people inside the cave drowned. The bodies of the other tourists and both guides were recovered in the days that followed. The incident drew national attention across Thailand. Authorities immediately closed Nam Talu Cave and issued a seasonal closure order. From June through November each year, the cave would remain off-limits due to flash flooding risk. Warning signs were installed at the entrance. Local tour companies were instructed not to conduct tours during the rainy season. For more than a decade, the closure was mostly respected, but enforcement remained inconsistent. Schroeder's Pants Cave. On February 13, 1965, 3 members of the Boston Grotto Caving Club arrived in the small town of Doleville, New York. Their goal was to explore a cave in the foothills of the Adirondacks, known locally as Schroeder's Pants Cave. The group included 23-year-old James Mitchell, a chemist from Massachusetts, Hetty Miller, and Harvard graduate student Charles Bennett. All 3 were experienced cavers with multiple expeditions behind them. Before entering the cave, Mitchell visited George Lyon, a local man who'd helped discover the cave in 1947 alongside Herb Schroeder. Lyon provided background information on the cave's layout and described the main passages, but no one warned them about current conditions. Temperatures had hovered around freezing for the past week, creating significant runoff. Ice-cold water was now pouring through the cave's narrow passageways in volumes far beyond normal. Despite this, the 3 cavers decided to proceed. They worked their way through the cave's named sections, Lemon Squeeze, Z-Bend, and Gun Barrel, until they reached an open chamber. Below them was a vertical shaft that dropped roughly 80 feet, about 24 meters, into a bell-shaped cavern. Mitchell volunteered to go first. He clipped into his safety lines and began lowering himself down the shaft.
Partway down, something went wrong. Mitchell stopped descending and appeared to be struggling. According to Miller, who was watching from above, he attempted to descend further, then tried to climb back up the rope. He couldn't make progress in either direction. He had positioned himself directly beneath a stream of water flowing down the shaft. Rescue reports later estimated that approximately 10 gallons or 38 liters of freezing water were hitting his head and body every minute. The cold became the critical factor. Mitchell's strength began to fail rapidly. His voice grew weaker with each passing minute. He called up to his teammates, but his words became less coherent. Eventually, he stopped speaking altogether. His body went limp on the rope. Bennett and Miller tried desperately to pull him up. They spent 45 minutes struggling with the rope system, using every technique they knew, but couldn't generate enough force to lift him out of the shaft. Realizing they couldn't save him on their own, Bennett exited the cave to find help. A newly formed cave rescue team, the National Capital Grotto Rescue Squad, flew in from Washington, D.C. on Air Force transport. The operation made national headlines. Among the 6 young rescuers was Doug Bradford. None of them had experience with an actual cave rescue, but they had trained for similar scenarios. They descended into the cave and reached the shaft where Mitchell's body hung suspended. Their first attempt was to pull him up by the rope. It was immediately clear he was no longer alive. Bradford later explained that Mitchell's body was completely limp, and they quickly understood this had become a recovery operation, not a rescue. The team worked for 3 days trying to widen sections of the cave to bring the body out, but during one of their rigging attempts, part of the shaft collapsed. Dirt and debris began falling into the cave. Continuing was no longer safe. With Mitchell's body still suspended in his harness, the decision was made to seal the cave. Explosives were used to close the main entrance. Large rocks were placed over the collapse site, and a memorial headstone was installed nearby. James Mitchell remains in Schroeder's Pants Cave to this day. George Bugrada. On February 6, 2014, 5 experienced Finnish cave divers prepared to enter one of the most dangerous underwater cave systems in Europe. Plurdagra, also known as George Bugrada, is located in northern Norway near the Arctic Circle. Their objective was ambitious: dive through a submerged passage that reached depths of 420 feet or 130 meters, navigate through the mountain, and surface in a distant dry cave chamber on the other side. It was a journey that required absolute precision and flawless execution. Each diver carried a closed-circuit rebreather, a sophisticated breathing system that recycles exhaled air to extend dive time at extreme depths. The group was highly trained, but this cave had claimed lives before. The tunnels were brutally narrow, the water temperature hovered just above freezing, and the depth pushed the absolute limits of technical diving. One mistake at these depths would be fatal. At first, everything proceeded smoothly. The divers followed a fixed guideline that led through the submerged passages. They moved in a staggered formation, each diver managing their own buoyancy and trim in complete darkness. The only light came from their headlamps cutting through the black water. They navigated through tight restrictions, carefully controlling their breathing to avoid stirring up sediment. After nearly an hour underwater, they reached the deepest section of the route, where visibility naturally dropped and the tunnels grew even more confined. Then something went catastrophically wrong. At approximately 360 feet or 110 meters deep, one of the divers, Jari Huutarinen, became stuck. He was wedged in a narrow restriction between 2 rock walls, a section of the cave where movement was difficult even under perfect conditions. He couldn't move forward, he couldn't back out, and his rebreather began malfunctioning.
In cave diving at extreme depth, panic means death. Another diver, Patrick Gronquist, immediately tried to help, but the tunnel was too narrow for both of them to maneuver effectively. Visibility began dropping fast as silt lifted from the cave floor. Within seconds, both men were diving blind in freezing water. Jari's breathing became frantic and erratic. His mouthpiece slipped out. Patrick tried desperately to reach him, to reinsert the backup regulator, to free his partner's arm from the rock. But every movement stirred more silt. The effort was failing. Patrick faced an impossible choice: stay and die with his friend, or leave and try to get help. He left. He had no other option. Back at the surface, the remaining divers realized 2 men were missing. Emergency services were contacted immediately. Within hours, Norwegian police declared the cave closed and the bodies unreachable. The risks of another dive, they said, were simply too high. But the diving team didn't accept that answer. A few weeks later, a new plan was organized in secret. A team of Finnish divers, including close friends of the deceased, returned to Plurdagra against official orders. They were going to bring their friends home. Over the course of 100 hours, they penetrated the deadly cave system again, this time solely for body recovery. They worked in near total silence, inching their way through the same restrictions that had killed Jari and Patrick. When they reached the spot where Jari had died, they found his body still wedged in the narrow passage. His rebreather was flooded. His arms were still in the same position as when he had last tried to free himself. Deeper in the cave, they found Patrick's body. He had died attempting to reach or assist Jari. His equipment was mostly intact, but he had exhausted his breathable gas long before any help could have arrived. After carefully securing both bodies, the team began the extraction. They navigated back through some of the tightest underwater passages in the world, carrying their friends with them. When they finally surfaced, they had completed one of the most difficult body recovery dives in cave diving history. The mission was later documented in the 2016 film Diving into the Unknown. Nam Talu Cave. On August 6, 2024, another group entered the same cave system in Thailand despite the official seasonal closure. The group included 22 tourists and 2 Thai guides. The weather that morning appeared clear. They began their tour in the afternoon. At around 5 p.m., while exiting the cave, a flash flood struck without warning. Water from upstream rain reached the cave system and surged through the narrow tunnel. Thai rescue teams responded quickly. They extracted the tourists and 1 guide. But the second guide, a 37-year-old man, was swept away by the current. His body was found several hours later. He had been helping others escape when the flood overwhelmed him. 17 years after the first disaster, the same cave claimed another life. These tragedies share a common thread: warnings ignored, conditions underestimated, and nature's power respected too late. Each of these caves remains a memorial to those who lost their lives in the darkness below. If you found this video informative, consider subscribing for more stories like this. Feel free to share your thoughts or suggest topics for the next video in the comments below.